Today we have Ben Lipschitz from FoodByUs, a successful founder and associate in the menu log before. And FoodByUs just secured, I think, $15 million funding altogether.
Altogether more than that, but most recently
$10 million.
Yeah.
So Ben, talk us about what is FoodByUs? How did you start and what is the idea behind it?
Sure. So FoodByUs is a one-stop shop for restaurants, cafes, anyone in hospitality to order from all of their suppliers in the one place.
That's great because one of my business is actually restaurant, and we struggle a lot with finding the right supplier, whether they will deliver or not, and there's a very good market gap. So how did you come across this market gap?
Yeah, a lot of people, customers eating in restaurants don't realize that what's happening in the back of house, in the kitchen from a supply and procurement point of view,
True.
is very, very old school. So you've got a chef or an owner, and typically they're ordering from, even for a small restaurant, 10 to 15 different suppliers.
Definitely, yes.
Someone for seafood, someone for fruit veg, someone for meat. There's no Coles or Woolworths for a restaurant.
Yes.
And the way that they order is through phone, text, fax,
True.
voicemail, email, all these
Yes.
things. So we already have this marketplace, experience with Menulog. And so we understood there's power in connecting a bunch of buyers with a bunch of suppliers.
Yes.
In Menulog, obviously, connecting consumers with the restaurants.
Yes.
The idea came about when we looked one level up the supply chain.
Understand.
And so we sort of said, well, there's great technology available for restaurants to gather customers. What are the suppliers doing to gather restaurants as customers? And what are the restaurants doing to order from those suppliers? So it became quite, an organic exploration of what does the supply chain look like?
Yes.
And from that, the more restaurants we spoke to and the more that we understood, hey, this is a real problem, the more excited we got about the idea.
Definitely.
And that's really what happened. It just grew
Right.
from there.
And you recently featured in AFR, and I was reading the article, and one of the problems that you mentioned over there is the buying and the negotiation power of the buyer that the big restaurants get, but the small one doesn't get.
Yes.
So what is the angle there?
Yeah, so if we take a step back and we look at the restaurant or hospitality scene in Australia, you have your quick service restaurants, McDonald's and things like
Yes.
that. They do not need help. They are great at procurement.
Definitely.
And perhaps a level down from that, you have big hospitality groups like Solotel or Maryvale
Yes.
or whatever. They also don't need our help.
Definitely.
But in Australia, there's a huge fragmented independent restaurant scene. In fact, there's about 90,000
Wow.
independent restaurants. Even if you look at Deliveroo or Menulog or any of these guys, they've got 30 or 40,000 independent restaurants
True.
listed on them.
Yes.
And these guys did not get into the restaurant business being passionate about procurement.
Yes.
They are passionate about people and running a small business and perhaps the theme or the location of what they're there to do.
Yes.
And the experience they want to offer customers. It's
True.
not exciting for them to
Yes.
get up every day and renegotiate the price of lemons or apples or whatever. And they don't have that buying power, and it's a very hard focus to maintain
Yes.
because the prices are constantly shifting of meat and seafood and fruit veg according to seasonality, according to market forces and all
Understand.
that. And so they just don't have that buying power, and they don't have the time or energy to stay on top of it. And that's a problem they face. Now, other businesses have the same problem, but they solve it with people, and they've
True.
got procurement divisions
Yes.
and things like that.
Yeah. The larger businesses can.
Exactly.
So true.
So we, give them the keys and the tools and the power in a sort of, democratization of supply to say, hey guys, jump on the network, become part of the group buying experience,
Yes.
and save yourself time and money. That's
Definitely.
kind of the...
Yeah. And coming back to B2C versus B2B, in B2C market, mobile first makes more sense and is de facto because everybody's on mobile, they're going to order through mobile. But in B2B world, what was the thing that, how does the FoodByUs, is it more mobile first platform, or is it more like a desktop or a web first solution?
I think it's a really good question, and I think taking a step back from that, what's interesting about your question is that in B2C, the form factor or the platform in which the user is going to
Yes.
interact with your software matters a lot.
Yes.
And I think in B2B, the form, although it's important, and I'll come back to that in a second.
Sure.
It's not the first consideration. It's really what is the problem I'm trying to solve?
Yes.
What is this B2B, I guess, this unique business going through that they must have solved, and they will not care so much if it's desktop
Exactly.
or a mobile, or if there's an app, or if it's running through
Exactly.
a browser.
So you got some easy choices that where you can develop rapidly by targeting one platform rather than all platforms.
Yeah, I think it becomes about the problem very much.
Yes.
Now, having said that, we are selling into chefs, and chefs are
Mhm.
busy, and absolutely most of our users use it on a mobile phone.
That's interesting.
And we do imagine the user late at night because they're offering
Mhm.
ordering after service.
Yes.
So it's 11 p.m. It's dark where they are. There's a pantry and a fridge, and it's a whole
True.
dark kitchen area.
Yes.
And many chefs have English as a second language.
True.
And so we really have to factor all of that in.
And is
to
the
how we
platform
design.
is the platform multilingual in that case?
It's not. It has capability to be multilingual, and sometimes we do
Mhm.
use that. But more in how we solve that is through the user interface,
Understand.
the size of certain pictures or fonts, or
True.
how you kind of interact with it.
Understand.
Yeah, so absolutely. FoodByUs' case, it works on a desktop, it works on a mobile,
Yes.
and all of that. But we're I think more concerned with
The
problem,
problem.
where the user's using it, what time
Yes.
of day, and then from there flows, I think,
And that is
all
so
of
true, because people usually go into this mindset, oh, I need to build mobile app, or I need to build desktop. They don't focus enough on the customer actual engagement. Like you said, it's dark in the kitchen late at night, and where they're going to use it, or how they're going to use it. The usage matters so much than the targeting, okay, which platform is better, or the form factor and so on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's tempting to say apps are cool. Let's start with
Yes,
an app.
exactly.
And then you kind of mush the functionality
True.
into there. But in our case, an app will come, but for now it works in a number of browsers, and that's enough.
Yes.
More importantly is all the
Yeah.
things we just discussed.
So give us more understanding about how long it took you to do FoodByUs. What was the target? Because one of the things that I always find businesses that misjudge is that okay, world is your oyster, and they start to go global on their day one, and they fail miserably because it's too complex problem, and they don't have revenue coming in yet,
Yeah.
and it becomes you don't have a sustainable business plan.
Yeah.
So how did you solve that? What was the target that you initially said, all right, this is where we're going to launch, or this is our target as a first thing, and the market fit, obviously. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so first thing is it was an absolute journey. So I think the product we launched with was just working and just okay.
Of course.
So we probably took between, I'd say, 8 to 10 months to sort of code a version 1. And we knew that we wanted to have suppliers be able to manage their presence on a network. So
if I may ask, how many suppliers were the initial target, that I need 10,000 suppliers or 1,000 suppliers before I can launch this?
yeah, that's a really, really good question. We thought 50 is enough. How did we come up with that number? Nothing really specific other than really going to a few restaurants and
Yes.
understanding, okay, if the average restaurant that we're talking to is sort of using 10 to 15, and that they're using roughly sort of
Yes.
10 categories, as in fruit, veg,
And
seafood.
did you also narrow it down by the restaurant type versus fast
Ye-
food versus restaurant, and what type of cuisine?
We did, but because we didn't want to go too narrow too
Yes.
soon, we sort of averaged it out. So between pubs, clubs, restaurants, cafes, you've got,
Yes.
call it 10 to 15 suppliers, and then we sort of said, well, each supplier represents a category: fruit, veg, seafood, meat. And then we thought, what does choice look like? You probably want 2 or 3 per category. So we sort of said, okay, 2 or 3, 10 or so categories. Let's kind of get it around to 50.
True.
That was kind of version 1 of the supply
Understand.
mix. And you always go after the suppliers first because
Of
they've
course.
got their own business. They're quite happy to sit idly on the network.
Yeah.
And what's the point of getting a buyer to come if there's no
Of course,
suppliers?
you can't buy anything.
Yeah. So sort of version 1, I guess, building it, 8 to 10 months of getting, okay, a platform in which suppliers can do things like create a product, upload a photo, and all of that. And then, of course, on the buy side, we really needed them to be able to do things like search by category, filter, do postcode-based search, obviously, because not every supplier goes everywhere. And all of that actually took quite a while to get. And like I said, it didn't even look great when we launched it.
That's where everybody starts, I guess.
Yeah. And then I think if I can talk about a mistake we made is having launched probably after 8 to 12 months of coding and then launching. So coming up to our sort of first, I guess, 18 months of operating, we were a little too excited probably by the tech and all the cool features we thought restaurants would want.
Yes.
Whether that's certain kinds of reporting or certain kinds of integrations or things that just excited us as a tech company.
Of course.
That we started kind of building the roadmap around what we thought we could do to enhance the life of the restaurant.
Okay.
Which was silly, because what we should have been doing and what we ultimately focused a lot more doing and really, really drives us more today is asking the restaurants, tell us
what you
about
want.
your operating, not necessarily what you want,
Yes.
because I don't think restaurants are great at articulating the solution,
yes.
but certainly tell us about your day. Where do you spend time? How are you ordering? Where are these errors coming into your procurement sort of
understand.
life cycle?
And what were the major findings there?
Well, once we sort of stopped building what we thought was cool and started listening to their daily lives, the problems were a lot simpler than I think we had sort of envisioned. And that was things like errors in ordering because you've made typos on the text that you wrote.
Okay.
So they were often texting their order, and if you get the SKU code wrong or the quantity wrong or whatever, the supplier's going to deliver it incorrectly.
True.
Then, even if you get it correct, it is very common for avocado or meat or whatever to just be bad. That's food.
Yes.
So there was this concept of issue resolution. I, as a chef, don't want to call the supplier every day and say, you've delivered bad avocados.
Yes.
So how do we get a digital tap to resolve system? Things like this. Things that are late. Where is my delivery? So very, very basic problems.
Of course.
They're not sitting there thinking, gosh, I wish I had this great integration and
know.
reporting tool. It's more just things are late. Typos happen. It sounds very basic, but as a tech company, I think you're drawn to complexity.
Yes.
But focusing in on those problems, then actually we started to build more.
And that is very interesting, because I know from my own restaurant, the most common problem is they bought a box, like 3 things were missing, and the common answer, I'll bring it tomorrow, because they're like, I'm coming tomorrow, I'll bring it again.
Yeah.
All right. And how does that blend into the system? Like, did they require like a very good, because what happens is when you go to accountant, they're like, no, you need history of everything, but that's not how restaurants operate. They're like, okay, bring it tomorrow and it's fine.
Yeah.
So did you have to cater for those use cases, or were they taken out of the platform and handled manually?
So once we understood that as the problem, okay, now we've got our thinking hats on. So first thing is we look at the data to understand what are the most common problems.
Yes.
And then we started separating it out by what is the least touch solution for most of those problems. So for example, in something like 90% of cases, whatever the problem is, the chef is just happy with a refund.
Yes.
And so we started building a very simple touch to resolve system where if it's bad quality or it's late or it's a substituted item or it's a missed item, as you said, probably you just want a refund. So you can just select it, take a photo, indicate what's going wrong, and you get a straight refund.
Okay.
And that actually solves it most of the time. Now, in your case, for example, they may want it the next day, and then it has to go into a slightly different, I guess, decisioning.
Yes.
But we'll push for a refund where we can, because it is just so much easier for us and for the supplier.
And the transaction is
restaurant.
done, completed.
So it's actually the 10% that's harder to solve, because now it requires, okay, do you want to talk to us, FoodByUs, or do you want to talk to the supplier?
Understand.
How urgent is it? Do you really need it the next day, or could you kind of last a bit without that product?
Yeah.
And so, that becomes a little bit more complicated.
And you touched a very interesting point, because this is the problem that I have seen businesses try to do, or the technology businesses, when they try to create technology, that they think everything needs to be automated and handled by platform. You need the manual blend into it when
Yeah.
to cater for those 10% of the scenarios, and people don't realize that works much better than just
Yeah.
building everything inside the platform.
Yeah,
Uh,
100%. And in particular, when you're a marketplace-based business,
Exactly.
We not only have to accept that 10% of the time
Yeah.
it's just going to require some kind of
Exactly.
interaction,
Yes.
but also that we, as a marketplace, are not the best person for the chef to be talking to because
True.
we don't necessarily know
Understand
where the
the
truck is or what
lesson
exactly.
and everything.
So it's oftentimes the solution is let's connect the two of you.
Connect two of you.
And then our tech value out there is how do we connect you?
Yes.
Can you tap and be connected to the supplier? Great. What's a better solution? Can you tap and be connected to just the right person within the supplier's network?
Wow, that's great.
So,
Yes.
so then it becomes, let's add role titles for the supplier's side so that when you have a delivery problem, you're not just connected to customer service of the supplier, but their logistics
The
department.
logistics. Yes.
So there's nuances there, but oftentimes the marketplace just get the hell out the way because you're better off letting the two
Of course,
sides talk
yeah.
to one another.
And how many revisions did it take to understand that this is the way to do it? Because people think that their MVP should have all these answers, and I don't think that is usually the case.
No, so I think, if we take a timeline, so say we've been actually operating for 4 years, 8 to 12 months just to build it. Another, honestly, 6 to 12 months of building what I would say is cool stuff that no one necessarily wanted.
Understand.
And so really still evolving to this day, and we're in 4 years now
Of course.
of understanding the problem and then iterating the solution.
So
So the
is it-
MVP was
Yeah.
okay, but really way off, I think, from
Yeah, of
where
course.
it needed to be.
Yeah. And so would you say is it typically a 3-year period before you get your head around what you actually need to solve and have some solution that you can be proud of, rather than saying, yeah, it works, but I need to work on it?
Yeah, I think I would say in our case 2 years before it really started to connect. And in our case, that was sort of 2017 coming up to end of 2019.
Yes.
So just as we were connecting, hey, there was this new challenge in
Yes.
early 2020 that everyone knows about called COVID, and,
Yeah.
and that was a whole different thing. So
That's
yeah.
great. So with that time, I think the cost comes hand in hand and the complexity. So how did you raise at the start of when you had the idea, or what points you started raising, and when was the you guys had a very good history, so maybe the investors were ready to put their money in early on.
Yeah.
But what is the typical startup journey that what do they need to actually raise successfully?
Yeah, I think I can only speak from our experience,
Yes.
and in particular, it's important to say that we're a marketplace.
Yes.
And a lot of a marketplace means you're building that highway before you start putting heaps of cars on it, right? And,
Exactly.
and that just takes time and money. So we did raise in the beginning, and you are right. We had a little bit, I think, of that menu log sort of aura and the fairy
Yes.
dust. It was this great exit in a marketplace-based business. So we
Yes.
were fortunate to get Macquarie Bank as a seed investor.
Great.
And they put in $500,000 in basically when we founded it.
Yes.
We raised a bit along the way, but it wasn't really until sort of, as I said, we were connecting towards 2020, end of 2019, that we
Yes.
did a bigger raise. And a lot of that was keeping our costs low while we built this marketplace, and that chicken and egg of suppliers, buyers,
True.
until we got that to a point where we could show good numbers
Yes.
to investors, and then we did a raise then, and then most recently, the $10 million round.
Yeah.
So it took probably 3 or 4 little rounds to get there.
And one of the other important problem that I see people, one, obviously the product to market fit in B2B world, because in hospitality industry and in marketplace, you hear ideas like every single day, oh, I have this cool idea.
Yeah.
But how do you assess that idea and say, okay, yes, there is a gap and this is going to add value? How do you put a use case and a business case around that?
That's a really, really good question. And I don't think the answer that I'm going to give is at all going to be perfect for every scenario.
Yes.
But certainly some of the things we looked at is how consistent is the problem across the industry. So if we look at FoodByUs, well, how many places that are a restaurant or a cafe need to order food? And
Yes.
the answer is every single one. Is that okay? Great. And how many of them have really good procurement? So I guess what is the consistency of the problem? And I guess how prevalent is it across the
Yes.
industry? And it turned out that almost no one that we spoke to had really solid, good procurement systems. And then I guess how much of a problem is this going to be in the long run? Like we didn't see it getting any better.
Yes.
And then I think a really good point for our case is how much is technology really suitable to solve this problem?
True.
And one of the things about technology, which Menulog proved, as does Airbnb and Uber and whatever, is that when you've got a huge fragmentation of a lot of different buyers and a lot of different suppliers, marketplace businesses are really, really good at connecting all of these different fragmented parts.
True.
It's a great use case for technology.
Okay.
And I think there are a lot of problems in hospitality that people think of, but perhaps it's not faced by every single business, and perhaps
True.
tech is a mild helper, but it's not a game changer in that experience.
Understand.
And if you can, I don't know, get your coffee 2 minutes earlier because you forward ordered it, great, but is every single consumer facing that problem, and does that really, really help the restaurant? It depends, I guess.
True. And that is so true. And in terms of like one of the other common theme that I see in a lot of startups, because I work as a mentor in Founder Institute and a couple of other organizations, is that people, when they have to raise, they don't have a clear pathway or clear idea what they're going to use money for and how much it's going to cost, not to build, but to actually have a business that is making money. And there are two different things, as you know very well, that building something MVP is probably going to cost you 500,000, as you said, but to actually get out there, go to the restaurant, sign them up, sign the supplier, solve at least the metro level, like Sydney metro level, is a different beast, and there's so many other costs involved in that. So if you have to just size that, okay, if you are targeting Sydney metro, a kind of like solution, a scale of solution, and you want to launch, how would you do the budgeting around that?
That is also a good question in the sense of it depends, I think, on what your MVP really looks like.
Yeah, for marketplace, for example.
Yeah, I think for a marketplace, you've really got to think back to what's the minimum required for a customer.
Sure.
To hop on, and it doesn't have to be like a Rolls Royce experience,
Yes.
but what's it going to take in our case for a chef to hop on, see enough suppliers there that it's at least intriguing,
True.
add them to the cart and check out, and those suppliers will deliver that. That's our promise, I guess.
Yes.
Now, it doesn't have to be brilliant
Yes.
from day one, but then I guess costing it is, okay, well, you obviously need to get someone to go and sign up all those suppliers.
Yes.
I mean, obviously you have to build the tech platform.
Yes.
And that's fairly easy to cost in terms of it will take X many devs,
Yes.
X amount of time. So that's fairly easy to cost up. And then you've got to door knock some of these
Yes, true.
restaurants. So I think, in a Sydney metro-based case, you're sort of looking at the minimum product experience that's going to even get you one order, which is enough to get feedback and
Yes.
and go from there. So it's not too difficult, I think, to cost up in the early stages. And in a sense, that's the fun part, because you're on a low-cost base.
Yes.
You're just getting that one order and you feel great.
Yes.
But then you realize you're at the base of sort of Mount Everest, because by the time you actually realize you've got product market fit, which can come hopefully quite quickly, the second question, which is what we're really going through now, is how do I scale?
Yes.
That is a entirely different question.
Definitely.
And I think much harder to cost up than just getting to that
True.
one order.
Yeah,
But,
understand. No, that makes perfect sense. And let's jump a little bit in your tech journey. And I know you are not the technological founder, but I want, and that's why I'm more interested that what was it like? Did you have your technical co-founder in the staff on day one, or what was the journey like?
Yeah, so just some context is, so there's 3 co-founders of FoodByUs,
Yes.
and my background is in businesses, anything from marketing, sales, operations, or basically
Yes.
starting and selling businesses. the other two founders, one is very, very technical, loves to code, and the third is sort of, I guess, a hybrid of the two of us.
Yes.
Is technical and also enjoys, the commercial side of things. So within the founding team, we always had that technical ability, and I would say it's essential. We also had a founding hire who's still with us, who is a web developer.
Yes.
And I think it's important for a number of reasons, but in particular, it allows you to build a solution from the ground up that's going to be flexible over the long term.
Yes, yeah, true. Scalable.
I think there's a inherent danger in using off-the-shelf technology to solve a problem where what you're trying to do is for a particular audience, in our case, restaurants.
True.
With hopefully a solution that not many people have really come up before.
Yes.
And so if you're using too much off-the-shelf stuff and you don't have a technical founder and you don't have the ability, I guess, to customize around so many of these learnings that I've discussed that are coming at you so quickly in the early days, I think that you're going to become quite restricted quite quickly by what your platform can do and what solutions you can really offer. And whilst it may not feel that bad in the beginning because you've established product market fit and this is a problem and people are using it and they're coming back to use it and your metrics might look okay, later when you need to scale, you start to break quite quickly. And certainly what we've seen with competitors is those who didn't have technology sort of founders at their core and who may have built it more by kind of strapping together different things are now coming up against problems of integration and scale and things where we can deploy certain solutions
very quickly and
in a much more user-friendly way that they just can't in their platform. And I think that becomes a bit of a problem as you try and scale.
And just coming back to that, so technical co-founder is very essential to the business, but there are a lot of startups out there that doesn't have that luxury because, as you know, technical co-founder, finding a good technical co-founder is like, right now is like a needle in a haystack. And with the skill crunch going on, it's even finding a developer is hard, let alone the co-founder. So did you ever had to do like where you didn't have the person on day one and you had to work your way around?
No, we didn't have that problem. Gary, Tim and I had worked together in previous businesses. And there was immediate trust. And immediate acknowledgement of one another's skill sets.
True.
And that really made it, I think, easy to found and easy to really delegate who does what. There's no way I would touch the code. I don't know what I'm doing.
Of course,
and similarly for Tim, Tim's not going to build the sales team or the marketing function or anything like that. And that's great. So I think I can't really comment on that from a personal experience point of view, but I have done a few businesses, and I think generally picking your founders carefully and within a complementary skill set is absolutely essential. But there's a layer below that I absolutely feel with Gary and Tim, and I think is so important in founding as to your values as well, because there's skill set, and then there's values as well, and we align very differently on skill set, which is great. But very much the same on the values.
And
Absolutely.
that is very essential because when you have too many people, you need to be on the sync what you want to like prioritize versus do in a certain way. And keep those ethics common, and which is great.
Absolutely. And that is where when you're deciding on anything from the product roadmap through to whether you raise, at what valuation, what is the ultimate goal of the company, are we just building this full of hot air? You don't want to have those discussions with your co-founders and they've got very different values. It can make it quite tough.
True. And how big is the team right now, FoodByUs team?
Now we are 60 headcount, and we're going to grow that substantially in 2022.
And all of that in-house, or did you use any blended model?
So we have a team of 20 in Manila that is directly employed under a fully owned entity, but that wasn't always the case. There was a period of time where they were outsourced. But ultimately, we felt we were going to be able to work better together with them, and we loved that team, and they loved us, that we were basically going to start our own entity, and that's what we did.
That's very interesting because I have like personally myself, like I have a team in India, and we are looking at a very similar model as well, where we have the entity there and we own the staff and it's our staff, and it's very important because then you have the whole control and the sync with
Yes.
them. But as I mentioned, finding the talent is very hard, and you mentioned a very good point that you found a good company and then turn them into your own company, which is great. And we were looking at a couple of suppliers who can do that. Do you have any like tips around like how to go about that?
I think that when you're selecting a partner to outsource with, there are many different models, and some of them intentionally keep you far from their team.
Yes.
So they will, for example, not allow you to deploy your own technology. Like, let's just take Slack, for example. They may not let you allow their staff to use your company Slack.
Yes.
Okay, they keep that distance. So if you're going to start there, it's going to be very hard ultimately to form a proper relationship with the outsourced team.
Understand.
So I guess what I'm saying is, in even selecting our outsourced partner in Manila, and this was years ago, they were more of a hybrid model where we could, obviously they employed the staff and provided rent and offices and computers and all that, but we were able to deploy, even from the early days, our technology, emails and Slack and so on and so on. That meant they were already getting a sense of what it was to work at FoodByUs.
Yes.
By the time we then decided to separate from the outsourced provider, which was all fine, very openly done, and really just a discussion. But by that time, the jump for the team there to come to FoodByUs directly was way less.
Yes.
So I think it's about selecting an outsourced provider that works with your long-term vision. You can't do it any other way. Yeah.
Yes, and I think the other point that you also mentioned is like, you eventually had them working for you, not at the starting. And a lot of people, like, they go black and white. They're like, I'm either in-house or outsourced. There's no in between. And that's where the control and the scaling becomes harder, because you can't fully hire 20 people on day one. It's too much commitment to the business.
Yeah, exactly.
And that elasticity of the workforce is very important. So like in saying that, I guess you mentioned that as well, that like finding the right partner, finding consultants or experts is very important, as much as having your own technical co-founder and the team in-house, so that you can scale quickly.
Yeah, 100%. I think it is about understanding there are many, many different models, for outsourcing. I mean, even before we worked with this partner, we actually just outsourced directly through places like Upwork and whatnot, our own remote staff. But we found that at least in FoodByUs' case, it was too separated. It was too disparate, having all of these different individuals.
Fragmented.
Both working for us and notionally as an offshore team, but they were all in their own houses and so on. So multiple levels, I think, of control and fragmentation, all that. And in the end, we sort of chose, that hybrid that I mentioned.
Understand. Yeah. And so where is FoodByUs heading? Where is it now? How prevalent is it in Australia, and where are you heading?
Yeah. So right now we've got a team, headcount of 60. We've just raised $10 million. We're in Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane, and we've got about 1,000 restaurants using us, and we have 1,600 suppliers on the network, but a core group of what we call preferred suppliers of about 200.
Yes.
But obviously, we want the restaurant to be able to use any supplier, so they can just add whoever they want. But we work with a closer group. What does it look like from here is really scaling. Okay, so I think 1,000 restaurants can't be wrong. You've got your product market fit sort of thing. There's something there, great. And what we really want to do now is we've got sort of 90,000 of these independent restaurants in Australia. If you look at any of the delivery networks, Menulog, they're in 30, 40,000. Uber Eats, pick one. They're all sort of about that range. Yeah. So 1,000 is really not that many compared to what it could be in terms of the independent hospitality scene. So how do we get now to 5,000, 10,000 is the challenge for us. And that means our tech has to scale. It means our sales teams have to scale. Our processes have to scale. We can't go door knocking forever. It's a great way to get your initial customers, but how do we really go beyond that and build? And that's a challenge, I think, of a different kind. And a lot of it right now is hiring. And so we've got this great raise that we've done, but there's it's quite a tight labor market.
Yes, true.
So a lot of it now is, recruiting and building that kind of story that people want to come and join us in our vision. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. So you touch point on a story, which is very, very important. I think people join to you for your story, not just for the money. And in current market, that is so true.
Yeah.
Like at Enabler, we are growing in blockchain as well, and that's our story, that we want to become blockchain powerhouse. And that's the story that I'm finding that people want to join us. So what is the story you are selling at FoodByUs?
I think FoodByUs is unique because there are a lot of great technology companies out there.
Yes.
But not all of them intersect with the hospitality industry. There's a couple, but what we're building is unique, and it's unique within this great, exciting, fun industry that is hospitality, and in particular hospitality supply.
Yes.
And so it's a place where you can go and meet chefs and meet suppliers and understand how the whole procurement supply chain works in any role that you're at.
Yes.
Which is so fun and so interesting. So many people identify with that, and so many people are foodies.
Yes.
But at the same time, it's cutting edge technology. I mean, the stuff that we're building is really, on the brink sort of thing, and that's exciting too.
True.
And so we're really pushing innovation in an industry that everyone knows and loves.
Yes.
It's a big industry, and we're doing it kind of our way. And I think that's a real draw card. And also that we're fully Australian owned and Australian built and bred. And I think that some of the staff that we get from the more international tech companies that have an Australian presence, they come and they comment, wow, like the web developers, they're right over there. I could see this thing getting built. We're not dictated to by Silicon Valley or another offshore powerhouse. And that's exciting too, I think.
Yeah, it is.
So that you can really see it
What
come from the ground up. Yeah.
Yes, true. And you said scaling up and recruiting. Do you want to put out like what you are looking for, so maybe the viewers can actually come and apply for FoodByUs?
Yeah, there are so many roles. I think we're hiring for something like 15 roles at the moment. But obviously sales staff in Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane is key so that we can grow that footprint. But also operational staff to help make the whole business run better, and that includes things like working with our suppliers.
Yes.
Some of these suppliers are huge businesses, hundreds of staff,
True.
40 trucks, really supplying the best restaurants in the country. And so getting to work with them and integrating with them is another exciting role. Then also web developers, both front end and back end, marketing as well. So pretty much across the range.
All operations.
Yeah.
Understand, and that's great. So before we wrap this up, do you wanna share some insight that is not out there, or like that you want viewers to know from technology perspective, from business perspective, or like from your value perspective that you want to leave as a ending note?
I think we've touched on a lot today. I think that something we've worked hard to build at FoodByUs through the founders' values, and then as we've grown the company values, is our culture. And what we have found, obviously it's been a tough time for hospitality during the pandemic.
True.
We have found that our culture has been unbelievably helpful in how we interact with customers and in the industry, but also internally, as to how we interact with one another and how we support one another. And it's always nice when times are good to have a good culture, and you celebrate the wins, and we have quarterly social events and external speakers and lots of social causes that we support. Yeah, you feel good every day.
Yes.
But when the pandemic hits or something goes challenging for the business,
True.
that effect of, wow, I really work somewhere where I like the people and I like what's actually going on here is multiplied.
Yeah.
So that I think has been a key learning for us, and it's something we're going to continue kind of really strive hard to build a great culture around the team. Yeah.
Great, and that's a great insight. So if I'm to summarize our conversation today, I guess the key lessons is that you're not going to get it right first time. It's going to take a long time to build it. And then once you go out there, you're going to learn a lot of things that you did wasn't necessary. And there were a lot of things that you didn't do that you were supposed to do. So go out there, talk to the customers, find that product market fit before you start building as early as possible, and keep your patience, because as you mentioned, 3 to 4 years, 2 to 4 years to get where you are today and to scale up is a long time, and people quit too early. That is very, very important. And also the scaling journey that you mentioned is profound, because a lot of people think that they will build and then things will just magically start happening. But scaling is actually harder than just creating the first version, because that's where the patience is required, the persistence is required, and it's a much longer journey than actually the first version. So this is great, Ben. I'm really looking forward to this, and I will probably go and sign up my restaurant now and look for my suppliers. and I'm really looking forward to where this takes us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for coming in the show. Right, thank you.